feller told me one time they got a weed down here and they call it loco weed. When the horses and cows eat it, they get wilder than all get out.
What if the man you knew as the lovable giant from Bonanza, Hoss Cartwright, was hiding a story even more powerful than anything he ever played on screen? Dan Blocker wasn't just a television star. He was a decorated war veteran, a high school teacher, a father, and the quiet cornerstone of a family that nearly crumbled the moment the lights dimmed and the cameras stopped rolling. For over 5 decades, his son Dirk remained silent about the pain of losing him. But now, at 67, he's finally telling the story. And what he reveals reshapes everything we thought we knew about Bonanza, celebrity, and the fragile weight of legacy. Dan Blocker was larger than life before he even took his first breath. Born in Dalhart, Texas in 1928, he entered the world weighing a jaw-dropping 14 pounds. The doctor made a clerical error, accidentally naming him Bobby Don instead of Bobby Dan Davis Blocker. It was a small mistake on a boy who would never go unnoticed. At 5 years old, Dan lost his older sister Virginia to pneumonia. The grief sent his family west to O'Donnell, Texas, where they opened a small grocery store and lived behind it. It was a modest working-class life, and Dan grew up hauling feed sacks before he hit double digits. By age 12, he stood 6 feet tall and tipped the scale at 200 pounds. Locals used to rope off Main Street just so Dan could spar with older boys. By 13, he was boxing grown men and winning. But what set him apart wasn't his size. It was his kindness. He was Texas tough but gentle, soft-spoken in a way that made people lean in to listen. That same year, his parents sent him to Texas Military Institute, the same school that once shaped General Douglas MacArthur. It wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Because even then, people knew Dan's strength would need direction. In 1950, the Korean War interrupted those dreams. Dan was drafted, and the Army struggled to even find boots to fit his massive frame. His fellow soldiers called him the Big Un, not just for his size, but for his calming, protective presence. He didn't just survive combat. He rose through the ranks with astonishing speed, promoted from private to master sergeant in just 209 days on the front lines. But when he returned to civilian life, he didn't pursue fame. He taught high school English. He coached football. He drove a school bus. And at night, he studied acting in Los Angeles, landing bit parts when he could. Then in 1959, lightning struck. Bonanza hit the airwaves, and America met Hoss Cartwright, a character defined not just by strength, but by heart. Hoss wasn't just muscle. He was the emotional glue of the Ponderosa. He was loyal, gentle, funny, and brave. And behind that role was a man who was all those things. To millions, Hoss was a hero. But to one young boy, Dirk Blocker, he was dad. Dirk grew up watching strangers shout his father's name in grocery stores, chase him down sidewalks, treat him like something more than human. And yet, behind closed doors, Dan stayed grounded. He sang silly songs, read bedtime stories, and did his best to be a present father in a life that left very little room for privacy. And then, without warning, it was over. In May of 1972, Dan Blocker went in for routine gallbladder surgery. He never came home. A blood clot, a pulmonary embolism, took his life. He was only 43rd. Dirk was just 14. America lost Hoss. Dirk lost the man who made him feel safe. There were no tributes in the school hallways. No one brought casseroles. There were only reruns, and the ache of seeing his father smile on screen, knowing he was never coming back. While the world mourned a character, Dirk was left to mourn a man. And he did it quietly, far from the spotlight. For years, he avoided the fame that defined his childhood. He became a working actor, low-key, hard-working, carving out a quiet career in shows like Brooklyn Nine-Nine and dozens of other supporting roles. He didn't ride on his father's coattails. He built his own path, brick by brick. Because how do you follow in the footsteps of a man who left footprints the size of Texas? You don't follow. You walk beside. You honor without imitating. Now, at 67, Dirk Blocker is ready to share what it meant to be the son of Dan Blocker. Not the TV star, the man, the teacher, the war hero, the father who showed him what true strength looked like. Dan Blocker didn't act like a good man. He was one, and that's why his legacy doesn't end with the final episode of Bonanza. It lives on, in the quiet dignity of a son who learned how to stand tall, not in the shadow of a giant, but in his light. Because real greatness isn't measured by fame or by how many people know your name. It's measured by how deeply you're missed and how long your kindness echoes after you're gone. And Dan Blocker's echo still hasn't faded.